That's the official announcement. Cool. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Zach. I'm in the Office of Sustainability and Innovations at the City of Ann Arbor. And here we are on month 4 of the A2ZERO Sustainability Series. So welcome back. Tonight, we are talking about renewables and everything to do with renewables in Ann Arbor. While I've got you, a couple of housekeeping things. We are going to go through a few presentations. We have Julie Staveland from the state of Michigan. We have Michael Craig from the University of Michigan, and we have Julie Roth, who's also from the city of Ann Arbor. And once we get through everybody's presentations, then we'll go into some Q&A. And while we're here, I'd also like to chat about next month. I don't know if that's on my screen. Oh, it doesn't look like it is. Okay, cool. I have too many things happening on my screen. I'm not sure what's going on. But next month we'll conclude the A2ZERO Sustainability Series. So we'll be looking at how we can take all of the information that we have learned over the series and move forward. And what are the plans for Ann Arbor to achieve carbon reductions? We've got a synopsis here. You can also find an event description on the City of Ann Arbor's website, a2gov.org/sustainability/events. These are our wonderful presenters tonight. So we will just go ahead and I guess jump right into it. I don't see any reason not to. So Julie Staveland is the Assistant Division Director for the Materials Management Division within the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, or as many of us know, as EGLE. She's the Director of the State Energy Program, and she's responsible for administering energy, pollution prevention, and recycling grant and technical assistance programs. Julie is also the current infrastructure coordinator for EGLE, as well as oversees the Catalyst Communities Initiative, which the City of Ann Arbor participates in as well. Julie is passionate about working with communities and businesses to meet them where they are on their decarbonization journey and to help them prepare for a sustainable future. So without further ado, Julie, I pass it over to you.
Thanks, Zach. So before I dive into my presentation, I'm just going to say, sorry, I can't be there in person. And as a consequence, you might hear my dog in the background. So this is his normal, like, go outside and playtime. So apologies ahead of time. So as Zach said, Julie Staveland, I am with EGLE. So I oversee 3 main areas. I just want to give you a little background kind of on who we are. As Zach said, energy services, recycling, and pollution prevention. And each one of these areas are very much intertwined with the others. We provide grants and technical assistance in each of these areas, but they're all targeting helping communities and businesses on their decarbonization journey and to meet their sustainability goals. And they all work together in tandem, right? When we're talking about energy, we're also talking about recycling and pollution prevention. And when we're talking about recycling, we're talking about using efficient energy processes. But we also like to have our programs kind of focus on kind of 5 key target areas. So within energy recycling and pollution prevention, we're focusing on communities, so communities and schools, local nonprofits, the agricultural and rural businesses, as well as small manufacturers, and then ensuring equitable access to renewable energy and recycling, clean transportation, and workforce development. So I just want to preface this before I do a deep dive into some of our programs that are related specifically to renewable energy, is for every aspect of our interactions with communities and businesses, we follow the same process. You have to measure. You've got to benchmark what your energy usage is, and then understand your building envelope and where your energy is going. Because if you're not measuring it, you don't understand how much energy you're using, and you can't make informed choices on your energy efficiency upgrades as well as towards renewable energy. And our goal is to meet communities and businesses wherever they're at on this energy management spectrum, and to help them make informed choices, because we don't want them buying a bus when they really only need a bike. So our renewable energy programs that I'm going to focus on primarily in this first part, and then I'll touch on some others that are a little bit related to these. We have about 5 main ones that focus specifically on renewable energy. Obviously, energy planning and policy and technical assistance is key with our communities. So we have a grant with the University of Michigan that I'll get into just a little bit that deals with a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that gets us to the point where we can actually install renewable energy. We also have the MyReady program, which again I'll go into, which was a pilot program that we did through the U of M's program. We have Celica, which is a DOE accelerator that we decided to continue on that focuses on community solar for low-income communities, Catalyst communities, and then SolSmart. So in our grant with the University of Michigan that focuses on energy planning and policy, we started this grant, I think we actually signed the grant agreement probably in early 2019, late 2018. But essentially the question was, where is Michigan at in terms of our local jurisdictions? There's 1,856, but we didn't have a real handle on who had already zoned for renewable energy, whether it was wind, solar, commercial scale, or just residential scale. So the first portion of the grant really focused on curating that data and that information to create a database for zoning for energy. We also participated in the close-up survey, the annual survey that U of M sends out to all the local jurisdictions to really kind of take their temperature on energy and renewable energy in terms of planning and prioritizing and what their needs were and what their values were and how they thought their residents thought about it, to give us essentially that baseline. And it's kind of weird, honestly, looking back at it now, that we did that in 2018, not knowing what was coming with COVID and all of the stimulus dollars that were coming. But it's going to be fantastic when we redo that survey later this fall. Heads up for any local officials that are watching or listening. We can't wait to compare the data and see what has changed from 2019 to now. And then, of course, we worked on a bunch of online information that could be accessible to local governments in terms of templates and sample language and FAQs and case studies, as well as providing some of that real in-person, on the phone, through email, technical assistance for questions as they came up. So the database that looked at all of our 1,856 jurisdictions, we essentially identified who was responsible for those zoning, right? Was it at the county level? Was it at the local level? Was it unzoned, or was there no data on it? And if there was, the zoning type, was there any mention of renewable energy, whether that was, utility scale or residential? So as you can see, there's a lot of pink, there's a lot of blue, and there's a lot of gray. So it gave us that essential baseline of where we needed to go in terms of getting our communities ready for the renewables that were coming. And so this, of course, related to online resources that both communities could use as well as developers. The goal behind it was really to allow communities to learn from their peers, right? So if they saw maybe something, we've all driven 127 and we see, those the wind turbines there in Gratiot County, or Isabella County, sorry. So it's like you'll have communities that want to learn from their peers in terms of, I want to do that, I don't want to do that, I want to know what they did, what were the roadblocks that they ran into. So they can learn from Michigan, because if you're going to Minnesota or Washington or Colorado or Maine, it's a whole different play field. So this way our communities can actually learn from each other that's relevant to Michigan information. And then the other aspect of it was looking at developers, so that developers could approach communities who've already zoned for wind and solar in terms of commercial scale, so that they weren't going up to communities that hadn't zoned for it and knew that there would be potential roadblocks because they hadn't been prepared for it yet. So when we did that initial zoning database in 2019, in 2021, we can, because this is updated on a continual basis, so we're continuing to update this as we get notifications from communities that, hey, we updated our zoning ordinances, we'll update that on this database as well. So in 2021, solar zoning had gone up 47%, wind was up 8%, but we still had 25% of our communities that had no mention of renewable energy. So that told us that we still had a bunch of work to do in terms of our outreach and networking with communities. And then U of M also on the side, and maybe my panelists will be able to answer this a little bit more. But University of Michigan was awarded a grant through Department of Energy to continue that solar and wind zoning database, but looking at the Midwest region around the Great Lakes. So the online repository, there's case studies looking at different proposals, and this is all relevant to Michigan too. Whether it was put on a brownfield or if it was looking at wind versus solar and what was better. And then the other thing that we really wanted to do was make sure that our local jurisdictions had the tools in order to make informed choices. So we created the planning and zoning for solar energy systems. This was a partnership between University of Michigan and Michigan State University that was funded through our grant that provides those case studies, provides example language, and really breaks it down into bite-sized pieces for planning commissions to be able to make informed decisions. And we didn't just put this available online. We actually mailed a copy to every single jurisdiction twice, not just to the local government, but to the planning commission itself, to make sure that those local officials had a copy and knew that this resource was available. And we're actually in process of working on a storage guidebook, and then we'll be working on a wind one as well. And this will be free to communities to have them have that in their back pocket when they're looking at updating their ordinances. And this was one of the cool projects, was the MyReady. So this is the Michigan Renewable Energy Development Initiative. This was through a SEES project that Dr. Sarah Mills and I worked on. For those communities that hadn't zoned for wind or solar, how could we get them to zone was essentially the question that we wanted to ask. Was it, what sort of incentives could we provide? Was it technical assistance? Was it education? Was it resources? And so this master's project really kind of looked into that and did a deep dive to ask those questions. So it ended up doing 2 pilot programs. One was in Negaunee up in the Upper Peninsula, and then Milton Township, which is in the southern west corner of Michigan, I believe. And essentially, the great thing was that these graduate students went and worked with the communities. They helped troubleshoot some of those questions that the local planning officials had, and how do they talk to their residents? They designed surveys that were then mailed out. It was a little postcard that was mailed with a QR code that they could go to and take an online survey to really kind of take the temperature of the residents within the community, and get questions back from the residents that they would want answered. And then they helped facilitate some of those public meetings and troubleshooting some of the questions that the residents were putting back, answering those myths, myth busting a lot of the things that are around wind and solar, really walking them through, okay, when you set a setback limit of this many feet, this is what it looks like. And this is within your, jurisdiction, how much space you would have available for wind or solar, depending on which one that they were looking at. So this wrapped up their, they did a great presentation. We were super happy with the SEES students. Awesome job, if any of them are listening right now. And we're actually going to be continuing this fall with round 2 of pilot programs, really testing this out and making sure we work out the rest of the kinks with a couple more pilot communities so that we can then roll this out to a large program across the state. And then we have our Celica program. So in 2018, the Federal Department of Energy issued an accelerator for a clean energy for low-income communities, which stands for the Celica acronym. And Michigan participated, and that was our phase 1. We worked with Cherryland Cooperative up in the northwest Lower Peninsula to essentially work with 25 households and to adopt renewable energy, to buy into a community solar program. We liked it so much, but we still had questions on what that would look like with a municipal utility and with an investor-owned utility, because we have the 3 models within Michigan, and it works a little bit differently every time. And then there were tweaks that we wanted to do to the program to work it out a little bit better. So through each phase that we've done through the Celica program, we're working with the Department of Health and Human Services through the weatherization program and the local community action agencies, with the Michigan Public Service Commission, and then also with the utility, to really design a key low-income community solar project that works on signing up the low-income residents, providing weatherization assistance, assessing, where their understanding is in energy, providing that energy education, giving them access to those renewable energy credits or subscriptions, and then, doing some follow-up data and metrics to really try and curate what a successful model would look like in Michigan, regardless of where it's at and regardless of what type of utility they have. So we're in the process of wrapping up phase 3. COVID kind of put a delay on a lot of things, so we're still wrapping that one up. But we're actually looking at designing a phase 4 that's looking at some of these either with like a manufactured home or with, you know, a different model with like a multifamily home. So we're just trying to tweak that a little bit and see how we can develop a guide that then would be available for other communities so that they don't have to go through, you know, well, what works? How do we talk to our utility? How does it work with some of the other programs that are out there? So it's a ready to use guide that they can work with to do their own low income community solar program. And then of course, SolSmart. Michigan signed on to participate. We had some staff that went through the training and can connect communities to participate in SolSmart. And essentially, for those of you that don't know, you know, SolSmart is a way to work with communities to help them streamline some of their permitting process to make it easier for their residents to adopt renewable energy. So we are part of this and help connect communities to the SolSmart program. And then, of course, the Catalyst Communities Initiative. This is a little bit more comprehensive that looks at all of the areas related to sustainability and decarbonization that are within the control of a local government. Everything from water and land use to mobility to energy efficiency. And of course, you know, energy efficiency and renewable energy is in our wheelhouse. So this was kind of the catalyst for a lot of our webinars that we had in terms of renewable energy for wind and solar to provide those resources in the deep dive for communities on how to zone and things that they want to consider. And we're working on building these out. But essentially, it breaks it down into these 9 key areas with not only like what is it and how does it apply to you, but also what are your peers doing within the state? And then who has potential technical assistance in those areas. And we work really closely with Michigan Green Communities on this. Each of these 9 areas are the action items that are within the Michigan Green Communities Challenge as well. So the Michigan Green Challenge, you can participate in, get points for what you've done within your community and be designated as bronze, silver, or gold. And then if you've reached a gold or silver designation, you're eligible to participate in the Catalyst Communities Leadership Circle, which is kind of a step above cohort model where we provide technical assistance and facilitation to these leading communities that they also get access to fellows and, you know, just some more peer networking and some one-on-one technical assistance in areas that relate to what's important in their community at the time. Other programs that touch on renewable energy is, of course, our community energy management program. This is kind of our bread and butter. This meets communities wherever they're at. If they need an audit or if they're in the middle of energy efficiency upgrades, or if they've already done all those things, it helps them transition to renewable energy. We have a pilot program working with houses of worship. The main goal for this program is we've got 10 churches that are signed up. They receive energy efficiency upgrades within their house of worship so that they would be ready to adopt renewable energy. And then they pass that information on to their congregants with the idea that the houses of worship are typically a key cornerstone in any community, providing some of those human services and needs, as well as education, and they can help spread the message of energy efficiency and renewable energy throughout the community. We also are working with Lawrence Tech University in the accelerator program of Clean Tech, Climate Tech, Circular Economy. That's really looking at the whole energy spectrum in terms of how can we use renewable sources, how can we reuse products and create things that are more energy efficient for that circular economy. Our Charge Up Michigan program deals with electric vehicle infrastructure through our VW settlement program money that we got back in 2018, I believe it was. But we're also using some of this to look at if we pair an EV charger with renewable energy and battery storage, where can we deploy that? That'll help with the grid, that'll help with, you know, some of the areas that don't have the infrastructure for that, and also helps, you know, lessen the downtime that sometimes the chargers have depending on what their utility structure is. Restart is a contract that we have, which is for retired engineers, scientists, technicians, administrators, researchers, and teachers, retired professionals who can come provide some of that one-on-one technical assistance for communities and businesses to essentially look at the overall picture, help with that energy assessment and their waste streams, and identify opportunities for them to make those improvements. And then workforce development, you know, we're going to need a lot more employees in terms of the clean energy and renewable energy space. So looking at how we can work on some programs and fill in some of the gaps to fill those needs. And then of course, there's the end of the life cycle for the renewable equipment, whether for solar panels and for wind turbines. How are we reusing that material? How are we recycling it? So working with Next Cycle to really try and find, what are some of the other uses that we can do for those materials? How can we design those materials to make sure that they are recyclable and reusable? And then of course, all of the money that is coming through the two main stimulus programs through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. So these are just the programs that our office in EGLE is either going after directly, is partnering with another department on. It's a ton of funding, but in every one we're working at it, we're looking at that assessment, energy efficiency, and renewable energy aspect. And we're looking at making sure that these are not operating in a silo, but are working together and partnering together and really weaving them in with existing programs to make it easier for our communities and our residents to navigate. And then just to plug on some updating events that we have coming up to learn more about, more deep dive in some of these other programs. And that's all I got, Zach.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much. The other Julie here just leaned over to me and said, wow, I thought I had a lot going on. And yeah, that's really clear that the State of Michigan Energy Office and you and all your work is really pivotal for helping get Michigan to become a clean state. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. Lots of good info in there. We'll hop over here to Michael Craig. It's great to have Dr. Craig here. He's an assistant professor in energy systems at the U of M. His asset lab researches how to equitably reduce global and local environmental impacts of energy systems while making those systems robust to future climate change. His research advances energy system models to address new challenges driven by decarbonization, climate adaptation, and equity objectives. He then applies these models to real-world systems to generate decision-relevant insights that account for engineering, economic, climatic, and policy features. So it's an honor to have your perspective here, Michael Craig.
Super, thanks so much. I am your non-Julie panelist for today, so it's great to be here, and thanks for coming. So I don't have slides. I was just going to talk to you all. I'm not going to take my whole 20 minutes in case these comments are wildly off the mark, but what I want to do is walk through why we care about renewables from an energy security and an emissions perspective, and then talk about what the future might look like if we look 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, what it would look like not just here in Michigan, but around the world and around the United States. So first, I want to go back all the way to the 1800s, 1882. The very first power plant was built in the United States, the first commercial power plant. That was a Pearl Street Station in New York. It was one of Thomas Edison's plants. So in 1882, we started with one power plant for basically one neighborhood, just their electric lights. And for the next 100 years, what happened was there was one trend: bigger, 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 bigger. Bigger power plants, bigger networks, connecting more and more networks, connecting more and more power plants, to the point where we started building nuclear plants that were on the order of 1 gigawatt, which is an absolutely massive facility that can power a whole city. So everything went in one direction, more and more and more for 100 years. And now we're in this situation where we have the ability actually to go smaller and smaller and smaller, to go back to basically where we started, powering one neighborhood with 1 or 2 facilities. And that's really the magic of solar power and some of the other complementary technologies that we have coming around today. So we're going to get to this future world where we have gone not bigger and bigger, but smaller and smaller. And we're going to understand why we care about that from an emissions and from an energy security perspective. So on the point of emissions, where are we today in terms of what we have to do? So in the United States, we have about 60% of our electricity from fossil fuels, natural gas and coal almost entirely. So over half of our electricity, even though we always read about renewables, about wind and solar, most of it comes from fossil fuels still, and about 20% of it is from coal, which is the really bad actor when we think about emissions in the power sector. So the name of the game right now is to get rid of coal plants, and then it's to get rid of natural gas plants. And the things we do that with are basically at this point, renewables, wind and solar plants. People talk about nuclear. A lot of people want to build more, but the workhorse that is really doing all of the emissions reductions right now are wind and solar. And it's building more of them, so we have less of our coal plants and our natural gas plants operating. Renewables right now are about 20% of our electricity. Nuclear is the other 20% in the United States. So there is an immense amount of room for these technologies to grow. Now, I want everybody to think about what state you think has the most wind power in the United States. And I want you to think of that for a minute. Most wind. Maybe you think of California because everybody thinks about California when it comes to renewables, but it is actually Texas that has the most wind. And the top 5 states for wind are Texas, Iowa, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Illinois. Not states that you would think of as being bastions for climate mitigation or priorities like that. So we have an enormous amount of wind and solar in certain places in the United States. And right now, even though nationally electricity is 20% renewables, there are some places where we have a lot more than that from our wind and solar facilities. And California is actually the leader in how much of their electricity comes from wind and solar combined. So we're at 20%. We need to go a lot further than that. If we want to do what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change tells us to do, this is the international body that writes these giant climate mitigation reports. If we want to do what they say, which is like a 2 degrees Celsius world or a 1.5 degrees Celsius world, we need to go from 20% zero carbon or 20% renewables to basically 120% renewables or zero carbon. You don't just go to zero, you go beyond zero, you go to the negative territory. So we have way more work to do in the future than we have already. And all that work that we're doing is trying to get rid of coal and natural gas in the United States and then get rid of it everywhere else in the world and replace it with renewables and other things that come along with it. So that is the emission story in terms of what we're trying to do with emissions. More renewables, a lot more renewables. We can think also of energy security, which I don't know about you all. I lost power for 5 days in the most recent ice storm. I have lost power before that in my time in Michigan. Many of you probably also lost power. If you didn't, I don't really like you, sorry. So energy security is a huge challenge in Michigan and internationally and just in the United States. So energy security, I like to think of in 2 ways. One is we think of just power outages, natural storms, unexpected events that come through and knock out power to whole communities. But you can also think of energy security more broadly as households that aren't able to afford paying their electricity on a month-to-month basis, or when they do, they are facing significant trade-offs in what else they can buy in terms of food or medicine or other essentials. So I typically think of it from the perspective of just outages because that is really what affects me. But there are many households that would benefit from this broader perspective on energy security, and solar and renewables can really help us in both areas. We can think of resilience in your home. Solar and storage being deployed there can provide immense benefits. We actually wrote a paper with Amanda Farthing, who was a master's student in SEAS. She's now at the National Renewable Energy Lab. And what we did was we looked at hospitals, schools, and warehouses. And in those 3 places, we asked, what is the value of solar and storage being deployed there? If you just look at the bill savings or how much it saves you on your monthly costs, versus what if you take the value of resilience or being able to ride through outages and not lose power during those periods of time. And then we also asked, well, what are also the value of saving climate emissions and local air pollution emissions? And so when you look at that for schools and hospitals especially, where there's a lot of value in being able to keep the lights on, that value of resilience is way more important than the energy bill savings for a solar and storage facility. And in fact, if you just look at the energy bill savings, we basically said across the 14 cities that we looked at, it doesn't make sense to build solar and storage. You just don't break even, you're going to lose money, and we generally don't want to lose money. But as soon as you add those resiliency benefits on top of it, all those benefits you get from not losing power for hours or days at a time, now it makes a lot of sense to build a solar plus storage facility. So this value of energy security or resiliency, being able to keep the lights on, immensely important for making solar plus storage facilities actually valuable to you. As far as energy burden households, these are the households that are facing these trade-offs in what they spend their money on. They can't necessarily afford to pay their electricity bills, and if they do, they're foregoing costs elsewhere. And so here again, wind and solar can help a lot. Zach, am I still good?
Yeah.
Super. Okay, great. So here, wind and solar can also help a lot. We looked at, in California, the effect of rooftop solar facilities in driving down electricity prices for everybody. And we found there was actually a very large reduction in prices in a world with all this solar than in a world without it, on the order of 5 to 10%, if I remember correctly. So every time somebody builds a rooftop solar on their home, every time some utility scale solar PV facility goes in, you are reducing the month-to-month bills that other people pay, and you're generally saving those households money. And so there's this nice secondary benefit of solar, where if you build solar on your house just for those resilience benefits, it's going to have a nice secondary benefit of reducing costs for everybody else. And when you've got a lot of these rooftop solar installations going in, like in California, in aggregate, you get really large reductions in how much you're paying. So we have renewables helping us with emissions and with energy security. Then I want to talk a little bit about what the different futures might look like as we move forward, as we try to get our emissions down more, as we try to further improve energy security, what these visions of the future look like. So we can think about the next 5 or 10 years. I would call the next 5 to 10 years just more of the same. You can just build wind and solar and not worry about anything else. You just build wind and you build solar, and you can do that for 5 or 10 years in basically every part of the United States. You don't need to worry about batteries. You don't need to worry about grid reliability or anything else that people really talk about. You can just get away with building more. That is especially true in Michigan, in the Midwest in general, in the Mid-Atlantic, which are the two, and the Southeast United States, which are the 3 places that have way less renewables than other parts of the country. New England, the Pacific Northwest, California, the West in general, Texas, those are all places that are much further ahead in the race to renewables than we are. So for 5 or 10 years, just build wind and solar wherever you can. And the purpose of the Inflation Reduction Act that Julie just mentioned is basically to shovel money at the problem, to give people billions and billions and billions of dollars to build more wind and more solar. And in general, that will work fine for the next 5 or 10 years. When we think about what challenges come with renewables, there's 2 things that we care about. And these are things that I quiz all my students on in my classes. And that is, the 2 challenges are, they are variable and they are uncertain. Variable means they're going to change. The amount of wind power I get now versus tomorrow is going to differ because my winds are going to change. The sun rises, the sun sets. So every day your solar power increases and then it decreases. That is variability. It varies across time and it varies across space. One solar plant in Michigan produces way less solar than a solar plant in Phoenix because Phoenix has much better solar resources than we do in Michigan. So that's variability. We have to deal with that 10 years or more down the line, not really today. And the other issue that we have is uncertainty. So uncertainty means if I just look tomorrow, I don't know what it's going to be. Every day you might check the weather forecast. Some days it tells you it's not going to rain and it rains. That is an example of uncertainty. We do not have a crystal ball to know exactly what is going to happen tomorrow. So these 2 challenges, variability and uncertainty, these are what we really have to wrestle with as we build more renewables. And these really become important 5 or 10 years down the line after we've built a lot more renewables than we have today. So let's think about what that might look like 5 or 10 years down the line. Let's say Michigan or DTE or Consumers Energy follow through on their plans to decarbonize, which means build a bunch of wind and solar. And now they've got a ton of solar and a ton of wind all over the place. This is when we need something else to come with our renewables. And there's lots of something else's. There are something else's in terms of technologies that I can build. Batteries are the hot item in the power sector today. There's a bunch of batteries in existence, but when you look at what is coming in the pipe, when you look at who is building manufacturing facilities to build more of these things, it's all about batteries, and there is just explosive growth happening in that sector. And batteries are great because they can take your extra renewables when you don't need them, and they can move them to when you do need them. And so the classic example of storage being valuable is your solar follows this very clear diurnal pattern. The sun rises, the sun sets, and your solar generation is basically an upside down U over the day. What storage lets you do is it lets you take all that midday solar generation when you might not want it anymore and just push it into the night, basically. You charge your battery during the day, you discharge it at night. And so storage is one of the really important technologies that can help us deal with especially variability of renewables. And we've looked at how storage can interact with renewables in future systems. One nice thing about it is when you take solar from the middle of the day and you push it to the nighttime, in many sectors or in many parts of the United States, what you end up doing is reducing coal-fired generation and reducing gas-fired generation. So you get really nice emissions benefits when you move electricity across time, especially solar, from day to night. So we need to build other things from renewables in 10 years-ish. Batteries are one of those things. We can think of other technologies like electric vehicles or electric heat pumps or all the other electrification technologies. What those give us is a bit more flexibility in demand. Rather than try to make supply match up with demand, we're going to drag demand to come along for the ride with supply. And so that's what electric vehicles, electric heat pumps, and other technologies promise, is that we can control them. Don't charge your car now, charge it in an hour when I have a bunch of wind coming online. And in doing that, I can better handle, again, the variability that comes along with my renewables. And then we can think of other more futuristic technologies, I'd say, things like advanced nuclear reactors. These tiny little container, like the little rectangles that go in the back of tractor trailers. People are talking about putting a tiny little nuclear reactor in those things and putting them in neighborhoods or in different places in the country. So I don't really want one in my neighborhood, even though I do a lot of research on them. But these are some of the future far technologies that can, again, help us deal with some of these issues with renewables. And another part of this 5 or 10 years down the line future is this return to where we started in the power sector. We started with one small coal-fired power plant providing power to one community. The hope and the promise of solar and storage and other very modular technologies is we can go back to this very decentralized way of running things. Ann Arbor is working to create microgrids within the city to build solar and storage there. And so there are all these concepts for how can I get a small neighborhood to generate its own electricity and trade between houses the solar that you need and the storage that you need. And then this neighborhood is going to use blockchain or whatever crazy technology to work with the neighboring neighborhood that has more solar than they do, and they're going to go back and forth now. And then we're going to do it community to community. And so again, building energy solutions basically from the household to the neighborhood to the community to the intercommunity layers, that's one of these other futures that people are really working towards, trying to go from very large centralized power systems that we have today, way back down to working between households and between neighborhoods. And if you can get to that future, then you can use all of these really great modular technologies that don't have emissions and that provide security benefits to a lot more people who might otherwise lack them. So that's all I've got. So I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. Thanks.
That's all, huh? That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that really insightful and like the highlighting the importance of resilience in the renewable sector and particularly like in the economics of it, making it all work. That the resilience really highly values that because it's something that a lot of people overlook. So I think that's great that you're considering that. Wow. Okay, cool. Well, we have already had some fantastic information. We had sort of state level. Michael provided almost a broader, in some sense, term, and now we're going to get hyper-local with what's happening here in Ann Arbor, in this city. So I have the privilege of getting to work with Julie Roth, who is a senior energy analyst at the Office of Sustainability. And she focuses on the creation, implementation, and management of programs to facilitate community-wide adoption of solar, building electrification, and efficiency. Julie has a BA in biology from Kenyon College and an MPT from the University of Iowa. She's lived in Ann Arbor since 1994 and is a passionate green energy advocate, community organizer, educator, and liaison between the technical sector and the community. I will vouch for all of that. So without further ado, welcome Julie. Let me get you set up here because we gotta share your screen. Oh, where's my Zoom? There you go. Okay. Good?
Perfect.
All right.
Everyone can see that here and in the Zoom world. This is so cool. Okay, thank you, Zach. Thank you, everybody. And Michael, you made it sound so easy. Just build renewables and then, we'll figure it out. I can just go home. That sounds great. I love it. So thanks, Zach, for the introduction. I'm going to take it hyper local and talk about what we're doing here. Whoops, back. How do I go back? There we go. So if you're not familiar yet with A2ZERO, this is Ann Arbor's climate action plan. So this is our plan to get to 100% renewable energy by, 100% carbon neutrality by this is our plan to get to carbon neutrality by 2030 in a just and equitable way. In 2019, late 2019, the City Council adopted a climate emergency and instructed the Office of Sustainability to come up with a plan to get to carbon neutrality by 2030, which is like tomorrow, as Zach and I like to say. It's literally tomorrow. And so that's what we did. And the City Council unanimously adopted the plan, and now we are in the process of sprinting at it. The plan consists of 7 overarching strategies. The very first one is powering our city with 100% renewables. And how we're going to do that is we're going to build it here as much as we can in our footprint. And anything we can't build here in our footprint, we're going to build somewhere else. We need to electrify everything because we're burning fossil fuels in our homes and in our buildings. We heat our houses with gas burning furnaces, and we cook our food with gas, and we dry our clothes with gas. And we need to electrify these things as our grid and as our city is now being, at the same time, increasingly powered by renewables. We need to reduce how much electricity we're using to begin with, energy efficiency, because the absolute best energy is the energy you didn't use to begin with. And there's still low-hanging fruit there. The others have to do with reducing the amount of time we are in our cars, investing in pedestrian and bicycle and transit options, developing a circular economy, and improving resilience and adaptation here. So really what I'm talking about though today is that first one, is how are we going to get there in Ann Arbor? So first, we're going to start with residential solar, because this is something that we were able to get started with right away without much fanfare, without needed legislation, without needed policy changes. We could just start doing it. So we've been running a solarized program in Ann Arbor for 3 years now. This is a group buy program where residents of the community that are choosing to go solar, and the installers that they have chosen to go solar with, invite friends and community members, neighbors, church groups, book groups, you name it, to join them for a meeting. And the installer is there and I'm there, and we talk about solar and how it works and what the discounts are and what the incentives are. And the installer has agreed to tiered discounts based on volume. So we've pre-negotiated these discounts with area installers. And so depending on how many people move forward, you can benefit from kind of a bulk buy and significantly reduce the costs. In addition to the cost savings from Solarize, we see that the adoption is really high in a large part because there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning. There's kind of safety in numbers as you're investigating a new technology. And in addition to that, people are learning about not just solar, but their energy at large, because we don't just talk about renewables at these meetings, we talk about electrification. We talk about the health impacts of burning gas in your homes and what that means in terms of asthma rates in children. We talk about the grid and where the power is coming from, and resilience, and what happens in outages, and all of these things we talk about in these meetings. So now we have not just people adopting solar, but people becoming kind of what I like to say is mini energy ambassadors that now understand more of sort of where they are now and where they want to go. So the program's been hugely successful and so much fun. We have done about 36 group buys now in 3 years. We have gotten up about 4 megawatts of new solar through the program. About over 540 individual households have gone solar through this program. That represents about $1.8 million in savings in the upfront cost of solar, because we generally can negotiate up to 15% discounts for these bulk buys, which is not small. And even better than that is approximately $18 million in energy savings that the households that go solar will achieve in the 25-year warranted lifespan of solar. So solar energy pays itself off, right? You put solar on your roof, you reduce your energy bills, and in X number of years, it's paid for itself, and then it just starts paying you back. And like I said, the thing I'm most excited about is not even the solar that has come up, but all those 540 people plus another, I don't know, 800 or so. We have about a 44% estimate to sales ratio. All thousands of people who have now come through the program and learned about their energy and are excited about doing something. That's what's exciting to me. So you can kind of get an idea of what annual installations of solar looked like before the program started here. 2019, that big bar at the end, that bar was high because that is the year that DTE sunsetted net metering and started a different kind of way of paying you for your overproduction. So net metering, during net metering, you used to get full retail rate for your overproduction that went into the grid. And afterwards, it's about 50% now. So anyone who knew this was happening, who was really kind of plugged in, no pun intended, plugged in, they got solar that year. So we anticipated that after 2019, we'd drop back down. And we didn't know how much dropping back down we'd do with this change to net metering, but that's the same time we started Solarize, was the last quarter of 2019. And instead of dropping down, this is what happened, which is so much fun. So you can see where we had our first Solarize meeting, and that next year it went up, and we said, well, let's just keep doing this and see if it keeps going. And it does, it just keeps going. And it's the good kind of viral, not the COVID kind of viral, but the fun kind of viral. So after having such success in the residential world, and we're continuing to do it, in addition, I should mention that all of that extra business has stabilized local businesses. I know that local installers have hired engineers and installation teams and salespeople and interns and done job training. So this is growing that economy as well. So then we've turned our sights to the commercial sector as well. The needs are a little bit different in the commercial sector, and the same sort of model wouldn't really be applicable in a commercial sector. So what we did is teamed up with the Ann Arbor 2030 district to offer an Ann Arbor area commercial solar program. I should mention that both Solarize and this commercial program are open to anybody in Washtenaw County to participate. So this program provides free assistance to commercial entities who are thinking about going solar. So you can do your intake form, and you'll have an engineer, technical assistant, who helps look at your viability of your site. We have RFPs, request for proposal templates, to get bids, and they'll help you figure out how to sort of customize that for your use case. They will help you review the proposals you get so you can understand them. And then should you adopt solar, they actually will do a utility bill review at 1 month and 1 year post installation, so you can be sure that you understand what your utility bill looks like and that the solar and financial savings are producing as expected. So it really gives you a level of safety and kind of a level of third-party assistance in what can be a daunting thing when you're investigating something that you don't really know much about. So we're really excited about this program. We just launched it a couple months ago. We've already had several businesses who have are starting the process. So hoping to grow this over the next several years as well, because although businesses are, smaller in number in terms of who's currently putting solar up, they have bigger roofs. So there's a lot of potential there. This is the website. So you can go to the Ann Arbor 2030 district website. You can navigate to the commercial solar program, and that's where you can do your intake. We are walking the walk as well as a city, right? So we are working on putting solar up on municipal facilities all over the place. So we had an RFP that was released in early 2021 that requested designs for installations on 13 city sites. That was approved and is in process. This contains both medium sites and small. This RFP, the solar coming up from this, will give us an additional 4 megawatts installed on site by the middle of 2024. And the nice thing for the municipal sites is that electricity savings from that solar investment are going to reduce the operational costs of those buildings, which will help, so much of it will help return into the general fund and then can be reinvested, and we can do other things with it. Some of the city sites that are getting solar through that RFP include the water treatment plant, which is huge, wastewater treatment plant, Ann Arbor Municipal Airport, and then lots of park sites like ice rinks, pools, and golf courses. In addition, the city is currently investigating the potential for solar at even more city sites through another RFP that is currently, I think, out and accepting bids. So it's exciting, and we should be putting, like I said, walking the walk and putting solar up where we can, as we are looking to residents and businesses to do the same. Then you may have heard about a proposal that we put forward called a sustainable energy utility. And this goes to a lot of what Michael was talking about earlier about decentralized production, which is, this is very funny, but I was tabling at the Earth Day, a Leslie Science and Nature Center the other day. And I was talking to somebody about solar in general, and she said, she said, what's the quote? Decentralized renewable energy production is my love language. And I might have proposed to her at that moment, but anyway, so a sustainable energy utility, the idea here is that this is a publicly owned utility. Ann Arbor would be a utility, and we would be working in parallel with our current investor-owned utility, DTE, and we would be providing solar and storage anywhere that wanted to sign up for the SCU. So if you own a home, or you own a building, or you run a business, you could sign up for the SCU. We would put city-owned solar and batteries on your facility, and instead of you paying for that, you then start paying your electricity bill to the SCU, just like you pay your bill to DTE. And then DTE would provide power as well. So these are all grid tied at first. And then as we grow density of solar and storage in certain areas, we start microgridding under the grid, right? So that most of your energy can be coming from your microgrid. And then if there are issues or nighttime or long winter storms when everything's under 12 inches of snow, then we've still got the big grid for power as well. So it's the definition of resilience, honestly. And the more we can expand it and expand it, we are not using coal and gas, and we're able to start making an impact on shutting down some of those plants. The nice thing about the idea behind a sustainable energy utility is that we can do it. We can just do it. We can just start deploying it. So where we are with this is the city has issued an energy options analysis. We issued an RFP, and we hired Five Lakes Energy and Next Gen, I think, New Gen. And they are currently in the data acquisition part and analysis, doing this energy options analysis. So they are looking at how is Ann Arbor going to meet its renewable energy goals of 100% renewable in a just and equitable way by 2030. The SEU is on the table. The proposal that we put forward, full municipalization is on the table. So what would it look like if we bought the whole grid? And any other paths to 100% renewable that we're not currently really thinking about. We have asked them to center the city's adopted energy principles. So the city council has adopted a series of energy principles that include things like local generation when at all possible, good paying jobs, equitable energy production, so that we're really sort of focusing and maybe starting with the most energy burdened households and making sure that they are centered, things like that. So the results of this are coming late spring to early summer, and it's spring, so I'm excited. I can't wait to hear what comes of this. And no doubt it will create more of a community conversation as we look at what they've laid out in terms of the options, the costs, the co-benefits, the negatives, and then it will be a decision for City Council on what direction we move forward. Finally, last slide, just in case you're looking for more information, last year we had a electrification expo at the farmers market that was really successful and fun. We're going to do it again August 11th from 5 to 9. There'll be food trucks and music and stuff like that, as well as installers with solar and storage there. There's going to be heat pumps that you can see and touch and understand how they work, heat pump water heaters. There'll be energy auditors there showing you about blower door tests and installation, all the things that I get really excited about. Probably, I don't know how many other people get excited about this. Anyway, they're all going to be there. And so it's a great chance to kind of come and learn and get to know some contractors, get questions answered. We are also hoping to have launched at that point our new Energy Advisor program. And this is a program that we've been piloting. We're in the pilot phase right now, working with EcoWorks and Elevate Energy. And the Energy Advisor service is kind of like a concierge that you can call or do an intake form with your questions about energy and your home, whether you're a renter or a homeowner or a landlord. And you may say, I'm interested in renewables, where do I start? Or my bills are too high, I'm really burdened, I need help. Or I'm freezing in my house, I know it's drafty and miserable. Or I want to electrify everything and go carbon neutral, please help. Whatever your issues are, and you can call, and the service will be free. And they will help do an energy assessment of your home, connect with contractors who are qualified to do various services, help you evaluate the bids and select the projects, and make a map basically for yourself to get to as far along the path as you'd like. So really excited about that, hoping that's ready to launch or soon after the expo, but there'll be more information about that too. So I think that's my slides from the hyperlocal standpoint, and I'll sit down and I think we'll give it back to Zach.
All right. Thank you. Cool. So we are right on time to transition now into the Q&A. And so the way this will work is we'll have a microphone that I'm going to do my best to get to folks, or if you're able to help, thank you. That's a huge help. For those who are in person, please use the microphone when you are speaking so that people online and in the recording that's captured, that your question is captured in that. Folks who are online, you can use the Q&A to submit questions, and we will get those answered best we can out loud. While you're getting your questions together, I do just want to give a couple of shout outs. First, thanks to our panelists. It's clear that you all are doing a lot of really great work, and so we appreciate you taking the time out of your days to be here with us. So thank you. And also to the Ann Arbor District Library, who is co-hosting this with us and giving us this beautiful space and the support and the technology to be able to make this happen. And to Hannah Peplinski, who is here, who has done a lot of the legwork to make tonight actually happen. So thanks to each of you. Let's go ahead and move into some Q&A. So I see a hand there, and I'll get some of these online queued up. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. These 2 points may be a bit tangential to what was discussed, but I just thought it would be important to bring them in from mainly from residential adoption of renewable energy. Historically, throughout my period growing up and well into adulthood, the typical home input power was 60 to 80 amps circuit breaker. Nowadays, even with energy efficient appliances, it's 200 amps is sort of the minimum, and that doesn't even consider EV charging upgrades. So the point I'm trying to make is I think it's important for us to try to reduce our per capita energy footprint as much as our carbon footprint, because they're not really disconnected, because as was mentioned, the grid is not largely renewable at present time. And I think some of these efforts as far as decentralization may help in this respect, but I just wanted to bring that point. And the other point is, and this is sort of a nuts and bolts thing. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any solid state breaker box commercially available for a home, and so we're left with the standard electromechanical breakers, which actually are less safe than fuse boxes because they will trip slower than a fuse will blow. So I'd like to see a lot of money put to getting these solid state breaker boxes available for the home, especially if we're going to be using higher and higher current levels. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, go for it.
You should look in the Inflation Reduction Act. Have you looked to see if there's any money for that? Because I would not be surprised if there was. Yeah.
And because you've mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, and I saw Julie Staveland's, shall I call it exasperation at your own slide of the IIJA and the IRA. Inflation Reduction Act. They're huge. It's a lot of details to be sorted out, but I'll just do a quick plug here for folks who are still looking for information on the Inflation Reduction Act. Rewiringamerica.org is a really helpful resource, and they have a calculator there that will help you identify what benefits through the IRA you qualify for. So definitely, yeah, look at that. I do happen to know that there are electrical panel rebates available. So yeah, look into that. There's a question here. I see one here. We'll get to you next. And the one that came in here is a really good question, and one that comes up in almost every conversation that I'm having when it comes to electrifying, which is that as we electrify our grid, this person is expressing concern that we are then more reliant upon DTE's current fuel mix, which is quote unquote dirty, and that it's a fragile grid. And so the question, I'm wondering if you might be able to speak to the rapidly electrifying while also increasing the number of renewables. Why not install renewables-based generation and achieve grid resilience before pushing aggressively for natural gas and gasoline replacement via electrification?
I can take a stab at that. My stab is that we ran out of time to sequence things. The IPCC report is not shy about telling us how much time we have. And every single time somebody invests in a new fossil fuel burning infrastructure, whether that's a gas furnace in their basement or pouring money into gas lines or building a new gas plant, every time we do that, we are locking in those emissions moving forward for decades. So when we're talking about electrifying our homes, we're generally not usually talking about ripping out things that were just put in 5 years ago. We're talking about replacing things as they hit their end of life or as you remodel. And so it's not going to be as rapid as deploying solar and storage and wind, but it's necessary to start it immediately for those reasons. And then there are the health impacts as well and we can go into that, but of continuing to burn fossil fuels in our homes. And it would also speak to, as both Michael and I spoke to, the decentralization of energy production. So you can imagine what microgrids would look like in terms of being able to produce energy at the source of where you're using it, be able to store it and use it when you need it, and power your own heat pump, induction stove, etc. So the big grid is much less taxed by any of this because you're doing everything right on site. It's hyper local.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, just 2 points. So I heard two concerns in the question: emissions and security. California this summer, they were going through an extreme heat wave, and the system operator in California, who runs all the power plants and their transmission network, they asked everybody to consume less power, and people did, and they avoided a brief outage. So you can think of electrification in the worst case scenario, which is just more demand. And I agree, in DT service territory, for instance, that means there's more assets that are vulnerable to outages, although I own a gas furnace and that certainly didn't work when I lost power. But you can think of electrification in a better case scenario, which is you add demand, but you also add flexibility. Like DTE gets to turn off your air conditioner or your heat pump if you electrify your heat for 1 hour, one time every summer. And so you get a lot of benefits from electrification. You can think of the same thing with electric vehicles. And so it's not just a one-way street. I think you can get some benefits out of it, even in a place like Michigan. I think the emissions one is more uncertain, but just think it's a 20 or 25 year asset. Your heat pump at your home, or 15-year, whatever. Your electric vehicle is going to be around for 5 or 10 years. And climate change is not an annual problem. It is a cumulative 100-year problem. And so you just have to ask, will this over its entire lifetime, if I sum up all the emissions benefits, increase or decrease emissions? And I'm pretty sure the answer is it will increase today in Michigan, but over the lifetime of the asset, you will get a decrease, probably.
Great, thank you. We have an in-person.
Hello, I found the presentation very enlightening. It's good to get an overview of everything. Speaking of Ann Arbor, the majority of the people in Ann Arbor are renters. And there's a dichotomy between the landlords and the renters. Renters think about what is the price per month, and landlords would have to raise the rent in order to provide efficiencies and weatherize their houses. I'm a landlord, so I think about this a lot. One of the things it seems like would be helpful is if the rent board could certify houses as energy efficient and advertise that, so that the renters would know going in that they're going to be saving money, even though the rent might be higher than other rentals.
Do you want to take that? Or you want me to take that?
Go for it.
Okay. I say this because Zach is actually responsible for creating, right now it's in its end, like iterations and final stages, a policy in Ann Arbor called the Green Rental Housing Program, which is exactly what you're talking about. So the idea here, and you're right, 55% of residents in Ann Arbor are renters. If we don't solve it for renters, we don't solve it, right? And that's part of what we like about the sustainable energy utility as well, because it requires landlords not to necessarily have to have the upfront investment. Although we have seen landlords upfront invest in things like renewables, and then there are green leases that you can do that sort of then enable the payoff of that to come back to the landlord. But to your question, the Green Rental Housing Program is going to be an efficiency standard for rentals in Ann Arbor. So we can't, as a local entity, create mandates for building efficiency or codes that are greater than the state. That's Michigan law. But we can issue certificates of occupancy. And we have requirements for certificates of occupancy. You have to have a smoke detector. You have to have egress. You know, there's certain safety measures that you must have in order for us to say, yes, this is a safe rental. Well, Zach, tell me if I'm getting any of this wrong. It's hard to talk about someone's program when they're standing right there. So essentially what they've designed is a series of efficiency improvements, kind of like a buffet. And you have to score a certain score in order to pass the efficiency standard. And then over time, the idea is we raise it a little bit, and we raise it a little bit, and we raise it a little bit. And this will be, I believe, public knowledge, and so that renters can see kind of where they are and what the scores are, if you will, of various apartments that they might choose to live in. How did I do, Zach?
Great.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for taking it. My Zoom unexpectedly closed on my computer, so I was scrambling for a second to get the questions back up, but thank you. Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is just sort of a status update on it, which is that it is currently undergoing a refinement process. We did a task force engagement process with landlords and property managers and renters to sort of develop this green rental housing program. And we got a lot of great feedback, and we're just refining the checklist. It'll go back out for public review before it proceeds to council. But we're looking at late summer, early fall for something like that. But yeah, Julie nailed it. I think I'll go to back online for the next question here, and I'm going to look at Julie Staveland and Michael for a response on this. This is this person has noticed that their neighbors are getting gas generators. They're out in Commerce in West Bloomfield. Do you think it would be easier to implement microgrids for suburban communities on the edge of metropolitan areas? And Julie, I know that you were talking about a lot of programs for suburban and rural, and then also, Michael, you were talking about the sort of that difference between like really centralized utility and more microgrid. So I wonder if you two could touch on that.
Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
You know, microgrids are a weird, one of those awkward conversations that we have with utilities. So at the moment, no, I don't think microgrids are going to be easier than unfortunately, the fuel generators that, local neighborhoods are going to be doing. Until we can get that question resolved with the utilities, especially the investor-owned utilities, I think we're going to be kind of coming to that push and pull on what we can and can't do. I know with a lot of the legislation that's being introduced right now, both at the Senate and the House, as well as through budgetary items, not only at the state level, but also at the federal level, I think that that's going to come to a head here in the very near future. And I'm hoping that we'll get to that point where, yes, that is the ideal, where you would have a microgrid, maybe not every neighborhood, but, broken out so that in these emergencies, like Julie was talking about, that's the day-to-day, that's the one that's providing it. And you only go to the bigger grids when you really need it. And especially for our rural areas, it works better if you have that distributed generation.
You feel good about that? Cool. I feel good about that too.
Great.
Thanks.
Great.
There was a question here about asking for more information about the bulk buy programs for energy efficiency and air source heat pumps and heat pump water heaters and other electrical services.
Oh, that's a good question. Like, is the question about similar to Solarize? Can we do bulk buys for these other?
They're just asking that we talk more about the bulk buy program. So I think
okay.
You can take that any way that you would like, Julie.
Yeah, sure. So the bulk buy program right now is for solar. And the reason it works so well for solar is because there are efficiencies. An installer, we're trying not to fleece local contractors either, right? So we need to actually produce something that is of value so that the contractors can reduce their costs, their soft costs, and then pass that on to the consumer. So with solar, we've created this model that does that very nicely. It's much more complicated bulk buys when you think about heat pumps, for example, because there are many different types of heat pumps, different use cases. There's mini splits, there's central ducted systems, there's dual fuel, there's cold climate heat pumps. It's not straightforward. Every house is different. Different installers sell different models. It's too complicated. So instead of a bulk buy situation for electrification, that's where the IRA rebates will help reduce costs. And you may know, I can't believe it hasn't come up yet, but Ann Arbor passed a climate millage in November, right? So we are currently in the process of designing rebates that will stack with the IRA rebates. The money starts coming, I think it's fiscal year 24, so in July. So we're hoping to have the rebates rolling out by the end of this year to help, like I said, stack with IRA. So this is a better way, we think, and we've worked with peer cities and done best practices with energy groups. It seems to be kind of universally acknowledged that this is a better way to try to lower costs than to do a bulk buy in some of those more complicated technologies. But if you're interested in the solarized bulk buys, that's easy. You just email me and I will send you information about an upcoming bulk buy.
Yeah, question here. Go for it.
My question is for Julie Staveland. I got a couple of them, actually. First of all, any news on the direct pay option for the IRA bill? Has Treasury finally wrote any details on that yet?
Are you talking about the rebate programs and the instant rebate?
Direct pay for solar, for installing solar. For
You
the
mean
nonprofits.
for nonprofits and
Yeah.
municipalities?
Yeah. I was wondering if you had any knowledge, or anyone on the panel had any knowledge. No.
I don't directly. I think Julie Roth might actually have more information.
Yeah, I don't know what the status is. I know that what the question is referencing is that historically, there's a 30% federal tax incentive for solar, which everybody can access when you're putting solar on your residence or your business. But historically, it hasn't been accessible to nonprofits and municipalities who don't pay federal income taxes. So what the IRA did was say, okay, for those entities, we're going to do a rebate. And I think the question is asking, how do I get that?
Yeah.
But I am not aware of details that have come out yet.
Yeah.
About exactly how you're going to access that.
Yeah. My other question for you on the Celica program, your phase 3, where you're going to go to an actual like community solar model, who's going to own the asset? Is it the utility, or is it going to
The
be
utilities own it.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Alrighty.
so in each of the phases, the utility owns the actual asset.
Yep.
And then in the models, actually maybe the Cherryland, they might own it. I have to double check on that one. But the selected households get a designated amount of panels that they're subscribed to that they get a credit for on their bill.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So we'll do one more online, and then we've got one here. So there's a question here. I've been doing these forums for a few years now, and always think it's interesting to see who in the audience appears. And I've got another resident. This one is from Novi. So just noting that it's interesting how the renewables conversation is really bringing in a broader audience, and I'm happy about that. They're looking at, Julie Staveland, they're looking at doing a local town hall over, involving residential energy security and installing batteries and solar. And I think, they're asking if these panelists might be willing to do another town hall in Novi and or talk about the SEU or other energy decentralization. I think I'm hearing a broader question here, Julie, about how residents in Ann Arbor and throughout Michigan can plug in and engage engage with some of these programs that EGLE has put together, where would somebody start to be involved?
So I think it depends on the topic, because for some of this stuff, it's way outside of my area of expertise. So you don't want to put me up as like the person who's going to answer like the really technical stuff. But yeah, we're more than happy to participate. I've got some awesome staff, and we've got some awesome grantees and contractors who can provide some of that technical expertise. So I would say, I think my contact information, I don't know if you're sharing the slides or not, Zach, is on there. You can visit our website. We've got Lisa Thomas. She's our engineer who works a lot on the renewable energy and clean tech spaces. Jesse Crawford is our community coordinator expert who works a lot with communities on energy efficiency to renewable energy. And then I manage the U of M grant. So, our University of Michigan grantee will come out and provide some of that more detailed information depending on the scope of the meeting. But yeah, we do presentations similar to this all across the state throughout the year. We're happy to answer one-on-one questions. We're happy to have, kind of those, not presentation format, but more of like the working meetings as well. So just feel free to send us an email and we're happy to get something set up.
Can I jump in real quick? There also might be interest both to that current question and the question that was asked over here earlier about, and Julie mentioned that there's legislation currently drafted and being considered in both the House and the Senate that would, for example, enabling legislation for community solar that would be where the asset would be owned by the community or somebody other than the utility. There's also other sort of solar friendly legislation. So if a community outside of Ann Arbor is interested in panels and possibilities of what might be, maybe some legislative, their legislators could also be instrumental in helping them understand the landscape of what could be coming. And if there's interest and it does pass, then sort of what that means in terms of possibility.
Yeah, totally. I think I'll just build on what Julie just mentioned, which is that in Novi, yeah, I would look to your local leaders. I mean, certainly, I don't want to speak for you, Julie Roth, but I think either of us would be happy to come speak in Novi. But I think the local leadership there will certainly be a great place to start, and that goes for everybody who's joining from another community tonight. There are some resources such as what EGLE is providing, but yeah, start looking locally at what you have going on and who you can influence there. I think we have just time for just a couple more questions. Do you still have a question?
I think it was mostly answered by the last one. I should just say we're both interlopers. We come from Ypsilanti, so we're still in Washtenaw, but anyway, we're both homeowners, like we're married, and I think we're all in, like we've been all in on sustainability and alternative energy for a long time. Like we both, we own an electric vehicle, we have a level 2 charger at home, et cetera, and so forth. And I think what our biggest hurdle is just cost, like upfront cost. And I know we can, I don't know, they have like a rental program for like solar panels and stuff, but I think the main thing is, I think we're just mostly just it's the cost that I think is really, frustrating for the both of us. Like we both work for U of M, but they don't pay very well. So, it's we want to be all in, we're trying to do our best, but it's just not ideal. So I guess I don't know if you, also we were a little late, so I apologize. If y'all could speak to that at all about what kinds of things that we can do as homeowners and as people with not a lot of money to how we can get in on sustainability stuff.
Absolutely. It's a great question. I'm so glad you're here from Ypsilanti. By the way, Ypsilanti right now, I believe the city, if you're in the city of Ypsi and not a township. Oh, Superior Township. Okay, because the city of Ypsi is actually doing a rebate program for solar for homeowners. So sorry, you're just sort of right out of everybody's district. But are you familiar with Michigan Saves? So Michigan Saves is a gem in our state. They function as a green bank for the entire state of Michigan. They work with various credit unions across the state, and they offer relatively low interest financing for energy efficiency upgrades. They have a loan loss reserve, which means that they're able to offer better terms for people than you would otherwise get because they are securing the loan with the credit union. Because they are able to demonstrate that when people make energy efficiency upgrades in their homes, they don't tend to default on those loans. They're not destination weddings or whatever people default on. Sorry for anyone who's had destination, I'm not slamming destination weddings. Anyway, Michigan Saves is fantastic, and they have a contractor network of verified contractors. We actually worked with them to create an electrification badge program. So if you're looking for deep work in the electrification space, you can go on their contractor locator and look for people with this electrification badge that can help you. They have energy auditors that are certified, and they can really help you sort of figure out, okay, if I invest this much money, you know, like with solar, for example, in the Solarize program that I do, sometimes with a modest down payment, you can get your monthly payment for your solar to approximately equal the savings in your bill from your electricity bill. And if you can kind of make that magic happen, and you're planning on staying in your home long enough to pay it off, then it's just a matter of, like, you know, paper really, and some degree of down payment. Same thing with energy efficiency upgrades. You know, some of them are very expensive and will not pay themselves off, you know, if you're going to tear off your siding and, you know, spray whatever. But some of them caulk, and some kinds of like spray foam insulation on your rim joists. These sorts of things can be pretty low-hanging fruit and can pay themselves off. And if Michigan Saves can help people finance those things, they're really a gem, and they're really easy to work with. So high 5 stars for Michigan Saves.
And I just want to chime into that, because while I agree 100% Michigan Saves is great, sometimes if your credit is not great, it's still hard to get, you know, those nice interest loans and even being approved sometimes. So like, I know Michigan Saves, they're doing a lot of work to look at what are the other ways that we can work with consumers that's outside of credit. You know, looking at, like, do you pay your bills on time? So like looking at other eligibility requirements. And then through some of the other stimulus funding that's coming, I believe it's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, like $7 billion is going specifically to green banks to help them ramp up to cover this side. And then with some of the tax credits too, there's not usually a cap on some of them. So you can, like, maybe do a panel this year and then a panel next year and then a panel after the year, that do it in stages if you can't afford it all up front. You know, so there's some creative ways that you can look at it. I wouldn't give up. And then obviously, you know, the Solarize too. So what other ways that you can bring down the cost of the solar installation by partnering with other people, bring down some of those, you know, bulk buy costs, and then looking at some of those creative lending solutions.
And just to add, I don't know if you were here when Zach mentioned it earlier, but Rewiring America, if you go to their website, you can put in your zip code and your income levels and your number of people in your household. Some of the rebates that are coming, especially for lower income households, are huge, huge, big. So that can be another resource.
Yep. Yeah. That's great. Go ahead and we'll do yours, and then we'll do just one more, and we'll wrap up from there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add it to Julie Roth's comment about Michigan Saves, but also the incentives to the utilities, through the utilities that are connected through Michigan Saves for certain upgrades. So take advantage of every dollar that's out there.
Great. Well, thank you again, ADL staff. We'll wrap it up here. There's one thing I want to plug is that each of these are recorded, and there's a lot of really helpful resources and information. And if you have not seen last month's, or you were unable to attend it, I encourage you to find the recording. It's available on our website. It's on CTN's YouTube sustainability page. And they talked a lot about energy efficiency in there. And so tonight we really focused on renewable energy. It's really wise to pair efficiency with renewables. And so there's a lot of great info in there. So please keep that in mind. I think the last note that I would like to leave on is I'll look to my panelists and I'll ask you, what is something that was not asked tonight that you think should have been asked, and how would you answer that? Or B, what if there's one thing that our audience walks away tonight knowing, what would you want that to be? So we'll just go down the line. I'll start, Julie Roth. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Think about that. So I guess if there was one thing I want people to leave knowing or thinking or believing, is that this is entirely doable. We have the tools. We know what to do, and it's just a matter of the political will to deploy it. And the other thing I would say is that when you're an individual concerned about climate, which is pretty much everybody at this forum, whether you're online or here, it can get really overwhelming. And you can spin out pretty quickly when you start thinking about every single individual decision that you make and putting it all on yourself. And, you know, I bought the thing in the plastic wrap, and it can be exhausting and demoralizing. So I would encourage people, here's my takeaway. The Solarize program, for me, I like to say it's better than Zoloft because instead of just my own carbon footprint, which I'm also trying to address, I am able to find a way to reduce the carbon footprint way beyond myself. Now, think about if everybody did that, just that, whatever it is. What if it was just like you decided that you were going to be the bamboo toilet paper lady, and you were just going to convince everybody you know in your entire neighborhood to stop using trees as toilet paper and to switch to bamboo, and that was your mission. And think about if everybody did one thing that was beyond their own selves, we'd fix it. So that's the kind of thinking that I think we have to have. I think we do have to think about ourselves, but beyond ourselves. And we can't just get wrapped up in ourselves. And we can't just point the finger and say, well, someone else has to do it, or just waiting for somebody else to do it, because that's not going to get us anywhere. That's what's gotten us here. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question. That's lovely. What I wanted to say.
That's really good. Michael?
Is bamboo toilet paper actually a thing?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know. Wow, that's exciting. The one thing I would say, it's exciting times. So much has changed. I started working in this field like 10 years ago at most, but I have professors who are working in it for 30 years. And 30 years ago, their career has gone from not even thinking about wind and solar to working on very detailed controls for systems with 100% renewables. So I just think it's really exciting. And as large of a problem it is, source for optimism, and it's just fun.
Fantastic. And Julie?
I think for me, it's relationships and it's communication. So the one piece, you know, we always say it's the one pebble in the pond, right, that creates the wave. But if we dump a whole bucket of pebbles, which is us, we can create like a tsunami. Right? Talking to your legislature, talking to your local government leaders, supporting, showing up at the meetings, talking to your friends and talking to your neighbors, it'll eventually get to the point where everybody knows about electrification. Everybody knows about energy efficiency. Everybody knows that we need to go to wind and solar, and it just is a common sense step to take. But we can't do that unless we're talking and building those relationships. So that's my one piece, is just continue to share the message, share what you learn, talk to it about with your friends and family. And build that, continue to build that momentum.
Boy, if that's not inspiring, I don't know what is. Thank you all for those words. Round of applause for our panelists, for the Ann Arbor District Library. Thank you all so much. My Zoom shut down again, but there were so many questions we were unable to get to, but thank you for submitting their questions. And there was a lot of gratitude from the online audience as well. So everybody have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next month.